Welcome to the Silver Creek Insights podcast. I'm your host, Felisa Wiley. Today, I'm joined by Oren Gruber, Director of Product Development and Customer Analytics at Amtrak, where he's led enterprise-wide digital transformation initiatives that impact millions of riders annually. With a background that spans federal consulting, lobbying, and AI strategy, Oren has a rare ability to connect policy, infrastructure, and emerging technology into one cohesive vision. Oren, welcome to the show. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, thank you for having me. As you said, I've been at Amtrak now for about 8 years, and prior to that, I worked all across the federal government as a consultant across communication, policy, technology, information technology, all different types of operations, infrastructure, engineering. And prior to that, I worked for an international engineering firm where I was a lobbyist at the end of my career for them. So quite a broad reach.
A broad reach it is. And what was that like thread of continuity that connected all of these roles in your mind with lobbying, consulting, customer data, AI?
Probably an appreciation for strategy and for what's been reflective on history, but also what's coming.
Yeah. And you've led Amtrak's enterprise-wide customer data strategy, and you've implemented some models for segmentation, churn. What's something that people still misunderstand about predictive modeling in real-world environments?
Uh, you know, good data going in makes it a lot easier.
Mhm.
And sometimes that's really difficult when you have multiple silos of data. You've also got the challenges of data quality and data governance. But when you start doing machine learning or AI, or even if you get to Gen AI and you want to turn over the reins, it becomes even more important because the next step of after you do that is to start asking, how do I use my prompts correctly? How do I get the right data and insights out of this? And if you keep running into problems or your ontology is wrong, you're going to keep coming up to this and you'll need maybe data scientists or somebody else to tweak it and make it function the way you like it.
So you mentioned like tweaking prompts. And there's this new term that I think was just like coined. I don't know what year, but it was fairly recently, prompt engineering. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, this is fun too because as they're getting better and better with the language prompts and how you can take that from in the old days when you'd actually have to code it, use Python or R or whatever else you're going to do. Now you can actually start doing conversational prompting, and it's going to be able to. It's I'm not going to say going to be able to, but it's going to get there to where your prompts are going to be able to say, okay, reach back into this library, pull this historical data, produce this documentation for me, and store it, and then let's reference it and tag all these different items with X, Y, and Z, whatever it might be. So that type of language prompts that don't get confused and get to know the customer is really going to help as long as it's done correctly, like we said. If the data
Yeah.
is right, it'll go better.
And it's so true that when you need accurate data as a strong foundation, so you have to become a master at that data ingestion, data quality checks, ensuring all that is good before you add any ML or AI on top of that. That should be like up here. The foundation should be right here with data quality.
Yep.
Um, Oh, I lost my train of thought. And with and with prompt engineering, you're constantly when fine-tuning the questions that you're asking these AI agents, in order to retrieve the kind of desired response that you're looking at. And it's kind of like an art and a science at this point where you really like with ChatGPT, I have one AI agent running, creating LinkedIn post for one of my brands. And when I was testing it, if you are not crystal clear in the kind of voice that you want to use as an output, the kind of character that you want this AI agent to play. So I think my prompt for this is like, you are a LinkedIn social media manager for a mindfulness tech company, and you want to create like different conversational pieces. And then I also did like something really awesome where I have I save all of the outputs in a spreadsheet and I'm like, double check against the spreadsheet to make sure that this isn't an output that you produced before. So there's always something new and fresh. And I'm always like, make sure that like 25% of the posts are about this, another 25%. So like I really wanted to be as specific as possible. And my prompt for that is probably like 4 paragraphs long just
Yeah.
to get that. But it's really crazy, like all that you can do. And in a previous discussion that we had, you talked about managing, like, you talked about the future of AI, and I remember you used this example of, like, a call center where you have a manager overseeing, members of a call center, and you see the future of AI headed where, like, a data engineer is now gonna be managing AI agents in, like, a similar manner. Can you walk me through that?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, what you're describing in a way is almost having AI archetypes. So it's like you
Mhm.
can pick and choose this archetype, and you can fully flesh it out with a different personality and backlog and checking and history. And I find that really, really fascinating. And it has some threads to, like we said, dystopian in some ways. But
Yeah.
that leads into the part you just brought up, which is the agentic model is really going to come about that way. It's like you're going to manage multiple agents, or you're going to have people manage multiple agents, like almost in a call center, because those AI agents will kick off and do their jobs and their operations. And when something doesn't go right, it'll be flagged, and you'll be like a foreman on site, and you'll be like, okay, let me figure out what it is, pull in this bot to go check and do a code sync. If there's something wrong, is data off, whatever it might be, depends on the job the agent's doing, and then you can just check all their specs. And there's still a need for a human level of engagement right now. Well, it'll be very, very interesting to see at what point we're able to completely move on from an FTE or a partial FTE, and whether you need specialty engineers, or is it going to come directly from the software? Is it going to be hard coded? Where are we going to go with that? I'm very curious, but that's decidedly coming.
And you mentioned this dystopian future. At what point did that, like, dystopianism, like, click for you where you're like, "Oh, this isn't gonna be good?"
I mean, I said it was dystopian because I think from the way I try and view things, there's that inherent quality of deliverable and growth that an employee that grows over time provides that type of value. This isn't any different than other parts in history when we got cars or manufacturing or automation, but this is such at a more rapid pace than
Mhm.
previously in history. So you could see, if you have dark colored lenses, it could be dystopian in no time. The Matrix, you're just a battery sitting over there. But it could also turn out to be something very positive, where it's like, well, now we can turn your efforts to something else. You can provide these type of support and operations and needs. It's just, how do we make sure people aren't left behind in the right or the wrong way? And that's the real political science and cultural component that I don't have an answer for. I'm curious about it though.
And you mentioned, how do we make sure that people are not left behind? I think that's one thing that when I love that take on it, because it's so important to keep those who are in tech, whether you're an entry level, a senior, you have to be one constantly adapting and evolving to the new technology that's emerging, to new ways of work culture, X, Y, and Z. But right now, how it's playing out is a lot of companies are immediately seeing the benefit of AI automation. Of course, it's beneficial, but they see it as a way to remove like those junior entry level roles. However, the issue that I foresee is that right now they're thinking about ways to cut corners and cut costs immediately, but in 10, 15, well, 8, 10 years from now, when those like entry level move up the ranks to mid to senior, then manager, director, because you're now missing them as the junior, they're going to lack that mentorship. And where does that leave them? What do you think?
I think it leaves us in a bit of a challenge, because you can cut corners to a certain point, but the higher up you go in an organization, the qualities you look for in leadership are going to change. You're
Mm.
still going to need to have some technical capacity as we grow, but ultimately, it's still going to have a different blend of people to people relationships, and then you're going to have people to technology, and then that dynamic in between the two. So I'm I'm hopeful that we don't leave everybody behind in the wrong way, where it's like, I'm just going to replace 20% of your back office because we don't need them and they're gone.
Mhm.
When you do that, though, you have to be aware from a business standpoint of your profit and loss. Can I do that? Is it going to be successful? What happens if I need to bring them back because something goes wrong? What if there's an infection? What if I get hacked? I mean, there's all those things where it's like, there's still a need for a human element
Yeah.
component put on top of that. And to your point, Felicity, about having seasoning and taking those junior skill sets and maturing them to more of a senior skill set, we're going to need that. And we're going to have to find that balance between, how do you make technology work for everybody, but not lose the human touch, because that's ultimately what AI is trying to replicate. But from what I can tell right now, there seems to be a significant backlash of going too far too fast, very similar to what Duolingo just got today or yesterday. I mean, when they announced they're going AI, and a lot of
Oh,
backlash about Duolingo because they went full on. They're like, we're going to go AI and use all this for that, and everybody's like, no, 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 and, signing out. So it's a cautionary tale of being too abrupt
yeah.
with the state of the current climate of where we're at.
And you think most of the tech industry is being too abrupt right now?
I think there's a danger depending on the market you're in. Like,
Mhm.
I'll use an example. If you're in transportation like I am, and there's a human component to it, and there's an insurance, there's a life or death, you do not want air traffic controllers to be an automated bot until that's been tested for a very long time, or running trains like in my organization, or not going through things. There are human decisions that you want them to be able to factor into it. However, the flip side is, do I need to get onto a call center conversation with somebody when all I want to do is just change my reservation? I just want to be
Yeah.
able to just, open up anything, Claude, ChatGPT, whatever your AI agent is, and be like, hey, change my reservation from 7:15 to 8 o'clock. And, instead of two people, make it three, something like that. That's, that's the case where it works for you. Finding the balance between the two is going to be really where we have not just a governance issue, but also a privacy issue and then a comfort issue with the public.
No, that makes sense, and you talked about, like, tech moving a little bit too fast, and as someone who has built real-time customer systems under congressional mandates, how do you approach compliance when all this tech is moving faster than regulation?
It's a difficult question in a way because a compliance, there's two levels of compliance. There's compliance you'll get in trouble for legally, and then there's compliance where your paying population, public, will show you in a different way. Meaning, we'll just stop buying from you, or not necessarily boycott, but they're like, oh no, they've had 5 data breaches, we're never going back. But from a legal compliance, we're seeing that right now, which is, does the congressional body have the right information to be able to come up with determining you can do this, you can't do that. Data should be owned. You, I think the most current example that I find that's really relevant is 23andMe. They just recently went bankrupt and they got bought by a pharmaceutical, and they had to send out a very broad email saying, hey, you need to opt out if you don't want them to own your DNA, because they will own your DNA strands, and then they will do more and more work on that. And inherently, that brings up a lot of questions. So it's the same thing of, well, how do you police that? That's
Yeah,
the public sphere, but at what point does that become personal identified information?
okay. That's a lot to unpack right there. And
Yeah,
you were a certified lobbyist, right?
I was, although officially I was government affairs because we did not officially engage in lobbying at the time, even though that's a very, fine line.
So in your view, because you also talked about making sure that congressmen had the right information to make the policies off of. What's the biggest disconnect that you, in your view, between technologists and policymakers?
It's a lot to keep up with between what's happening at the rate of adaptation and change in the marketplace versus in federal operations or even state operations. They have a totally different structure. You're
Mhm.
creating a budget 2 years in advance. You're executing that budget a year in advance. You're doing authorizations. You're doing changes. You're doing, changes on bills. You're trying to reconcile. It's like there's a whole different cadence to that. And the people that get elected ideally have the right interests in mind and have the right knowledge and skill sets to be informed and can make the right decisions. But we we exist in this country, and there are opportunities where businesses can engage in lobbying, or they can engage in sharing out what they think is the best process. And it's a very dubious space. And I'm not knocking anybody, but it's like I could provide you talking points as a senator or a congressman or a congresswoman, and kind of say, hey, we think this would be great in the EV market if you would bring this up to the committee floor and talk about this and put it into a boss bill or something else. So there is a space for that, and that's one of the benefits of our society. But it also gets into some of those political action committee sides, super PACs, and how do
Mhm.
we want to? I don't want to say police it, because that's also another dangerous term. But this is
At least guardrails.
ideally, yes, but
Yeah.
you've seen those guardrails recently changed quite a bit to where they might look at corporations that they see as having monopoly because they own so
Mhm.
much. Like what's happening recently with Google and GDPR in Europe is different than what they do here, where they're like, you're going to have to, like what they're doing with Google right now is saying you might have to divest Chrome from the rest of the alphabet because, Google and Chrome together is like 80% of search.
Crazy.
So someone in those committees is looking at that saying, well, okay, so you own Android, all the other parts of the alphabet, plus search, plus the appliances, and then you got Nest and all their other backgrounds. Like you have a phenomenal amount of information that you're monopolizing 80% of that market. So that's where, FCC and commissions really have to look at it. And it's again, it's a tough balance.
But that's also crazy to think about because Chrome's been around for years. So and Google behind the closed doors, they're wanting to gather all this data for obvious reasons because data is money, data is power. So they have Google Nest, they have Chrome, they have Android phones, they have a lot of other products as well. And those have been in production and out there and in the market for almost like 10, 15, 20 years longer than that probably. I don't even don't quote me on the
30.
amount of years, but
Yeah, I think about
now
30 years. Yeah, with
30
search.
years. And
Yeah,
now
with search.
policymakers are like, "Uh-oh, you're getting too big." But it's like they're years late. They're 30 years behind. They weren't behind those closed doors. Do you think there's ever a possibility that we will, as a country, have these guardrails set up before all of these products come out? Or is it after the fact, after the damage is already done? Because they can shut down Google as separated, but they kind of already had that data and they've already created other products off that data and they already have like their analytics and their marketing and their advertising. So it's not going to really change that much.
It changes some of the investment strategy,
Mhm.
certainly changes some of the shareholder strategy about
Mhm.
that. But it's very similar to when Facebook turned into Meta. And you're like, well, okay, now you bought WhatsApp, and that's supposed to be end-to-end encryption. That data is never supposed to be shared. They did the same thing with Instagram. It's like if you look at Facebook and you got Oculus and all that, I'm like, is that data going to never be shared that comes from here? Or when you go through those really quick, opt-ins when you sign up for something, who actually reads that and checks it? Very few people go through and read that and check it, and then there's not a clean opt-out methodology. So I have a hard time imagining that we're going to get to that point prior to the rate of technology adoption,
Which is
just
crazy
because of
because
all the things. Yeah,
yeah,
I mean, it's
it's kind of like a wild, wild west. Like if you're a technologist, if you're creating products, and you want to create something new that's gonna like shake up the market or shake up the like shake up like products and whatnot, essentially, you might be okay when it comes to like government regulation for like 10, 15 years until they pick up on it.
that's always the struggle between commerce is, where is regulation necessary for the public good and where is the public good supposed to be following innovation?
Yeah.
And there's a very, very fine line without getting into, you know, one party view or another that
Mhm.
changes over administrations. And
Yeah.
some administrations will put a lot of emphasis into one particular area and other ones will put it into the other side. And ideally, the state of commerce will correct that. That's always been the hope is that the public and the buying power and the international investment will keep it relatively on its center path. But that gets a whole lot more challenging when you start looking at what we're doing now,
Yeah.
because all this AI and Gen AI components and then quantum computing, fundamentally, they run on power. And that's why you're seeing so much of a growth in nuclear power and why they're putting money into these major companies. They're buying nuclear power plants that are going to be built in X, Y, and Z right away because that's cheaper than a fossil fuel. And they know they're going to have this much compute power. They're going to need it. It's like we're going to need tetras, tetras and tetras of, quantum computing power. We're all fighting for it, whether it's the FANG or somebody else. So it's fascinating in that sense, and that's going to happen regardless.
Yeah. And you've worked with federal agencies on research and development, cyber and risk analytics. What role do you think public sector data infrastructure should play in the era of AI?
I would like to think that there's a stronger component of something similar to GDPR, where
Oh,
if you're an American citizen, there are certain parts of your data that will never be shared if you want it that way. Social security number, you know, um, date of birth, so on and so forth, those type of things. But state agencies don't have the same funding as federal agencies, and there's no watchdog that says if I unsubscribe from this or I unsubscribe from that, does it get done? Who's going to make that happen and verify it? And oddly enough, AI could probably be the best solution for that because that involves a lot of data crawling, a lot of verification, a lot of data governance, and a lot of just back office operations that humans are not suited to do easily without an army of it. But AI would be really, really good for that. So I could see almost in a way it becomes kind of a police agent, but who's going to police the police agency? And so there's from the cyber side and from the governance component, I'm not sure I know the right answer because now we get into what administrations want to see happen.
yeah. And when you started talking about state funding versus federal funding, the first thing that I thought about in the context of like GDPR was CCPA. So that was a state, California. So the CCPA, for those listening, you should know this, those listening, but CCPA, California Consumer Privacy Act, I think it went into effect in 2019, 2020, and essentially gives consumers control so consumers have the right to request details about what personal data is being collected, why it's being collected, who it's who it's shared or sold to. Consumers have the right to delete, the right to opt out, and the right to non-discrimination. But the kicker with that is the only businesses that need to actually um, comply with CCPA are those that have $25 million or more in annual revenue.
Very
That
interesting, isn't it?
that's a lot of revenue. Um, so that means that smaller companies who are trying to get started in this game, if they keep their revenue at like 24 million, oh, they don't have to grant any of this. So it's a step in the right direction, but I do believe that revenue criteria makes it it reduces the efficiency and the powerful impact that it could have had.
I'm not certain the history, but in the federal government space, if you're going to be classified as a small business set aside, that's the threshold is 25 million.
Okay.
And I can't remember if that was one of the reasons it had to pass the California legislature, but it might be because that's part of it. And you're absolutely right. Like, well, if you do 14 million, that's a lot of money. Whatever your series
Right.
or your back office structure, or how you have that, you might have 6,000 employees, but none of them are stateside. Here's your
Yeah.
data. So I agree
There
with
are
you.
loopholes.
No legislation is going to be absolutely perfect. That's just a fact. I mean, it's unfortunate, but California has a lot of input, and the idea behind CCPA to be almost like a FOIA, like a fast track FOIA is great. But any organization, any business has had to do some pretty strong adaptive controls if they do business in California or they hold California data, just like what we do with international data. If you're someone from France and you want to opt out, I'm like, okay, I have to clean it out. And it's like, well, we don't do that here. So there is some laborious parts to it.
Yeah. And you've seen politics, like, up close. What do you think is one lesson from BC that data leaders in the tech world need to understand, but they usually don't?
I would say the law of unintended consequences. Being a
Oh.
disruptor is a great thing. It can lead to a lot of really positive things, but being cautionary and how it disrupts the establishment there's lessons to be learned there. I'm not going to say because there's too much to say one is a good thing or a bad thing. A lot of disruption is necessary and it's benefited us extremely well, but there are times it has not.
Mhm. What do you think, off the top of your mind, is one unintended consequence in tech legislature that's happened over the last 10 years? I know. How about this? 2.
I'll take the easiest one that nobody likes. Robocalls and ads,
Okay.
right? It's like until recently when you could go into, a dark mode or you could, turn off everything on, when Safari or
Mhm.
You go incognito in Chrome, it was really hard to be able to not have your data tracked with a third party cookie or even a first party if you opt into it. And it's like, why do I need to do that? From a business standpoint, I know why I would collect it. But from a consumer standpoint, like, no, you don't need to know any of that about me. I'm just
Mhm.
customer XYZ. And if I want to log in, I log in.
Yeah.
And the robocalls, honestly, I don't know anybody who likes a robocall. But once we went from traditional telephones to voice over, you got robocalls all over the place where they can just check out a number that looks like a phone number, but it's not. It's actually a VoIP. So those are the two things that I was always remembering. It's just I couldn't think of who really wanted it outside of ad companies or somebody who's doing those robocalls. And I'm like, half of those probably aren't even stateside.
Right?
Yeah.
And you've done product and analytics work across, like, transportation, defense, logistics. What lessons from industry to industry travel well, and what gets lost in translation?
Level of investment and return on investment. I think one of the best things about doing government work is the scale because no other organization has this much money that it can put into an endeavor per year. But that also means it comes with a lot of provisions and a lot of red tape. Maybe that's the best way of saying it is red tape.
Yeah.
All the things that have to happen. That's just always been a challenge, unfortunately, that it has a lot of good things to it. So across industries and, whether it is in transportation or it's in defense or anything else, it's like there's maturity models you want to cross, but you can't do it all the time. And then there's something that we're very familiar with now in this climate, which is, we're doing cost cutting measures from the federal component of it, which makes a lot of sense. Spending, a taxpayer dollar better is always a good thing. But that also means, do you trust the people to execute it? And in the federal space, if you don't spend the money per year, they often would say, give it back, or they would do what they call sweeps. So
Yeah.
then, the last quarter or something like that, you're going to put in your bid to try and get that 800,000 or whatever it is that's still sitting there, because everybody wanted to spend their money so they can ask for more the next year. And if you're in a private industry, you do not function that way. You're like, we can save 800,000 and still get the same output. Keep it. Let's do that. Let's put it in, whatever they're going to do with it. So those are just very, very different ways of doing adjudication of funds. And I don't have a solution on how to fix it all the time, but I'm just pointing out the differences between the two.
Yeah. So, let's see. So we've talked about the dystopian future of tech. What would your utopian future look like?
I think if we could find a way, and I don't want to say this so that it gets construed in the wrong sense, because I'm not proposing that we do something that's against our governmental structure, but how do we make sure, as I said earlier, that people don't get left behind and they still have a future that is positive and beneficial, whether it's through jobs, training, education, quality of life, all those things that kind of match up with our approach of governance and relative capitalism and investment, but still recognizing the human and the individual there, because that's the part with technology is that you become just a digitized number. This is your email address. This is all your digital traffic footprint. These are all the characters that we use for it. It's like, well, that doesn't have a person attached to it unless you know them. For me, I'd like to find a way, to use your term utopian, where we still recognize the individual or the groups of individuals. And we can also come up with a sense that I hesitate to use the word fairness because that's not the right way of putting it. But you want to give people the opportunity. If they choose not to take it, that's their choice. But
Yeah.
ideally, we give them a chance to succeed and be um, a positive return on our society.
So you talked about people not people being more than just their email, their phone number, and other, like, PIIs, that those, like, reducible parts, those different variables. How do you stay human in an increasingly algorithmic, data-filled world?
I think the first part is just remember there's an actual human there, and when you talk to them, and sometimes I talk directly to customers, or I listen when we're doing all kinds of things, and or when I travel, and it's for most of what I've seen, the general approach is people are pretty good, and they realize that they want to do that. So I would hope that regardless of what's happening around the world or even across our country, that we can still respect the fact that this is a person. It's not just their third email address or where they went to school or or where they didn't go to school, whatever that might be. That's that's the ideal, but it gets challenging at times, for sure.
And I'm also curious because even though we're reduced to bits and pieces, like female, the birth, age group, and whatever other bucket that I will fall into in like a spreadsheet table or database. What is the most surprisingly human insight that you've ever uncovered from a customer data model?
It's those idiosyncrasies where someone like you see someone was in one place at the same time as like five other people or something like that, or I was there or something. You're like, holy moly, yeah, I was there. I was on that. In my case, I was like, I was in that station. I was right there. It's like I might have even seen them walking by. Out of a million customers walking through this one location, I was there, and I can actually, pick up my phone. I'm like, oh, look at that. Yeah, I was there. I was there. So the randomness of things that still have a pattern is fun when you can
Yeah.
uncover that, and then you start building up, ontology and patterns off of that. I think is really cool.
So what do you think are some buzzwords that make you cringe in the tech industry, but you hear it all the time? But whenever you hear it, you're like, oh gosh, please stop saying this.
Uh, Cybersecurity, AI, Gen AI, because I don't. None of those terms are as blanket as we want to use them. I
Yeah.
think the difference between when we used to say information security to cybersecurity was truly not a very big step, but that's just the buzzword that was used. And I remember being like, wait, what are we talking about? Is it network security? Are we talking about packets? Where are we at? And it's the same thing with AI because to the layman's terms, we can use AI to do it. I'm like, well, how? I mean, you need a whole lot of things set up to make AI work, and let's not even talk about the cost to run the models and to set it up and to tweak it. And by the way, the cost to run it. How much data do you want to store? What
Yeah.
cloud services do you want to use? Who's going to do the updates? I mean, if you're in tech, you're already thinking, you know, a year in advance about like that. You're like, oh, okay, this is going to cause a spike. Okay, maybe not. Maybe we buy in volume, whatever it is. Or who's going to do it better? Do I just do it as a SaaS or do I try and build it on my own? What kind of model is it? Do I need to keep it internal only? So those are the terms that I find, I don't have a better answer for them. I would like some more description to it at times.
Yeah. And in 10 years, what do you think is more likely? AI co-pilots on trains or public trust in government data systems?
Probably AI and trains.
AI on trains? You're like, nah, it's going to take more than 10 years for public trust.
You know, that one from a historical pattern, I think since the 1970s when the US was involved in Vietnam and then we went off the gold standard, you can track these distributions of civic contributions and grassroots growth and de-evolution almost in a way, de-escalation from what were traditional drivers. So I just don't see that changing, whether it's religious institutions or nonprofit orgs. It's just changing rapidly with the way society is. So I don't want to say be skeptical, but I would be very surprised if there's suddenly a shift where like, oh no, we totally trust the government. I'm like, well, I don't know about that.
So that concludes all the questions that I had, but I do have two more rapid fire questions if you're down.
Yep, go for it.
All right. What keeps you up at night? Data privacy, system fragility, or the pace of AI regulation?
Data fragility just because of my day job. But if I was going to talk in a larger scale, it would be pace of AI regulation.
All right. And then final question. If you were a movie genre, what would it be and why?
Would it be and why? That's a good question. Probably be something a little bit clever with some dark humor, but ultimately with a little bit of a positive end. And I kind of like those thievery type movies. So I don't know, maybe something like Bullet Train or something like that, where everybody's not exactly following all the rules, but it comes out for the good. Maybe Snatch, something like that.
Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. This was a great conversation.
Likewise, appreciate it for listening.